Morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for coming out, and apologies for the hoarse voice this morning. I'm not used to talking this much, but I've had some really interesting conversations over the last couple days. So just getting started, of course, the standard forward-looking statement. I think everyone's fairly familiar with these at this stage, but if I start waving my arms and claiming, 10, 15 million ounces, then saves me. Just a quick project background. I think most people are familiar with the project at this stage. Location, in central Newfoundland. We're just about 80 kilometers south of Millertown. But I just wanted to take you through a little bit of the discovery history, the work that's been done on the property, and just open your eyes a little bit to how long some of these things can take to develop. So the first work on our property was actually done in the 1960s, looking for base metals. First gold showing was actually by Tim Froud, who I'm assuming is somewhere in the room, and that was in the late 80s. So if you think about, that's been basically 40 years from first gold discovery to what will be production in second quarter of next year. So it's not something that in general, you don't find these and then, a couple years later you're starting to mine. It usually takes 20, 30, 40 plus years from discovery to actually building a mine. So I think the next 20 years or so, you look at some of the other projects on the island, and I'm very hopeful that we'll start seeing some more mines pop up, but it is something that does take some time to build up. So Marathon Gold picked this property up in about 2010. I've been lucky enough to be on the project basically since then and really see this develop. So the initial discovery was at Leprechaun. We've been sort of working out from that, and in terms of the actual discovery history in terms of ounces, we had about 500,000 ounces when we first picked up the project, which was Leprechaun and a little bit up in Victory on the far northeast of the Valentine Lake Shear Zone. And we've built it up to just over 5 million ounces, all categories. I know I'm not supposed to claim that, but it's about 4 million measured and indicated, and another million, just over 1 million in inferred. So on average, that's about 375,000 ounces discovery each year, which I think is pretty impressive. And another figure that I've been looking at recently, I along with a few people did the mineral economics course over the weekend, and we've actually spent about $75 million in exploration over the life of Marathon's time and now Caliber's time on the project. So if you look at that, that's about $20 an ounce discovery, which I think is very impressive, especially for an area like Newfoundland that doesn't have a lot of real development. Up until 10 years ago and even more recently, people really didn't believe there was a lot of gold on the island. So to be able to discover something like that and build it up with a relatively small budget, when you look at total global exploration spending, I think is pretty impressive. So getting into the geology a little bit, I think most people will be somewhat familiar, so I won't spend too much time on this, but it's an orogenic, structurally controlled gold system. Generally, at this stage, most of our mineralization is hosted along the Valentine Lake Shear Zone, which is the contact between the pink rocks here, which is the Valentine Lake Intrusive Complex, and the Rogerson Lake Conglomerate, which is in the orange. Most of the 5 million ounces we have currently is constrained to about an 8-kilometer section of that Valentine Lake Shear Zone. And that's between the Leprechaun, Marathon, and Berry deposits, which again are within that 8 kilometers, and that's what we're looking at in our mine plan, which Jamie went over a little bit yesterday. So that's one thing I'll be talking about a little bit, is how we're targeting stepping out from that and where we see some potential. Most of the mineralization is quartz tourmaline pyrite hosted, veins anywhere from 2 to 30 centimeters thick, but we get these on echelon stacked packages of extensional veining that can run for hundreds of meters. Some of the holes we've drilled have been up to 2.5, 3 grams over 250 to 300 meters of continuous mineralization in our main zones. Currently 5 deposits with mineral resources, obviously working to build that up. We're hopeful over the next couple of years we'll have some substantial discoveries on the project. I won't go into this in too much detail. I think Ken did a great job of sort of covering off a little bit of the Newfoundland geology, but we're also located in the exploit subzone of the Dunnage Zone. We're located along just off from the, it's the previously known as the Red Indian Lake structure, but now the Beothic Lake line. And the more regional geology, like I mentioned, most of our mineralization currently is hosted between the Valentine Lake Intrusive Complex and the Rogerson Lake Conglomerate. But I also wanted to highlight this figure on the left here, and you can see all the red lines are the sort of crustal structures that separate all the different zones in Newfoundland, and all the little yellow dots here are gold occurrences. And you can see the close association with those gold occurrences and all these main structures. And if you look at similar settings in other major orogenic belts, it's very similar. You have these main sort of first order structures that separate your geological zones, and your mineralization is generally associated with secondary structures, either splaying or paralleling those initial primaries. And that's something we're spending a lot of time working on right now. Is I think what we're starting to realize, or at least working towards, is that the Valentine Lake Shear Zone may actually be a primary structure as well. If that's the case, there's a lot of potential there for some of the secondary splays, shear zones related to that to host as much, if not more, mineralization than what we currently see. So this is just a mock-up of the sort of emplacement history of what we're looking at now. We had a structural expert, Dave Reese, in a month or so ago, and just talking through sort of how these systems develop and how they get from the initial emplacement of the intrusion to what you see today. So generally, the way it works is you have basically a thrust. So this is associated, as Ken mentioned, with the Acadian orogeny. So there would be a fairly major compressional event. And you have on the left here, this is the Valentine Lake intrusive. So generally, it's a granitic intrusion. We have some gabbros in a few areas, but overall, we have some trondhjemites, quartz monzonites. And so this would have been in place originally, thrust up and over a foreland basin. So you'd have a foreland basin here on the what's now the southeast side, and you'd start getting erosion of that intrusion. So as that erodes, that sort of falls down and gets washed out into the foreland basin, and you see this very clearly in the Rogerson Lake conglomerate. There's classes of trondhjemite, class of quartz monzonite everywhere that have been compressed and actually moved into that foreland basin. As you get additional compression, that starts to fold and sort of compress over, and you start to get stretching, and you start to get a really nice developed stretching lineation that dips, in our case, dips to the northeast, which parallels some of the ore shoots that we've started to see. In some cases on these primary structures, you can get 10, 20, up to 50 kilometers of displacement along these structures. So that's something we're working on mapping. If you do sort of a regional map, you can actually get some orientations off your different lithological contacts, project that down at depth, and you can actually get a displacement vector on those. So that's something we're certainly looking at. Quick overview of the chronology. So our intrusion is about 570 million years old, two different ages on both the quartz monzonite or quartzite porphyry and the trondhjemite, about 566 and 573. The conglomerate is Silurian, so we're somewhere in the 410, 420 age. And we've had two different ages on the mineralization. One puts it at about 410, which is contemporaneous with the Silurian. One puts it at about 377, which is a little bit younger. So we're working through those ages to see, is there multiple phases? Is there, the 377 has a bit of a tighter deviation on it, but I think there's certainly areas of the province where you're seeing both ages of mineralization. So that would have been the intrusion in place there, and then this is sort of going through the Acadian, Neo-Acadian orogeny. Mineralization itself, like I mentioned, is all these stacked QTP veins, extensional veins. So you can see the relationship there between so we've got set 1 veins that dip off to the southwest, high angle set 2 veins that are roughly parallel to both the fabric caused by the deformation, as well as we have a series of mafic dikes that were in place parallel to that structure. So we've got some set 2 veins there that we're looking at now may actually be related. Well, they are related, same mineralized fluid, but a lot of times when you get these shear parallel veinings, you actually get horsetails of extensional veining coming off the ends of those, and I think that's what we're starting to see. So in this slide here, you start to get these vein arrays. So we don't have the shear vein visible here, but you'll have a shear vein running this way, dipping sort of into the screen. This is looking to the northwest, and then as that shear vein peters out, you'll get these series of extensional veins coming off the tail of it, and you get these vein arrays. So you get these sigmoidal vein arrays. You can see sort of the shape of them here. So just sort of working on developing the more detailed understanding of mineralization. It's not changing our modeling much. it's just really tweaking what we've already known. So getting into the current exploration a little bit. So I'm not going to go into a lot of results here. We've been doing a fairly extensive program over the summer. I'll get into a little bit of the overview of the regional stuff. But really I want to focus on where we see potential, where we see ourselves going over the next 2 to 3 years. So our initial program for 2024 was really a grassroots regional program. We did a till program, which I'll show you in a moment, which covered the entire property, LiDAR covering the entire property, and magnetics and VLF covering the entire property. And really the idea for that was to build up the regional targets, to get a good understanding of the structures on the property, and try to force ourselves to step out of that comfort zone of really working along our known mineralization and the Valentine Lake Shear Zone trend, which we've really been constrained to over the last almost 15 years. And then in July, we just kicked off a 100,000 meter drill program, which was very exciting for us. So we've been building up on that. We've got 3 rigs operating on the property right now, and we see that continuing through next year. So we're looking at about 75,000 meters of drilling next year, which this 100,000 meters will actually be the largest exploration program we've ever done on the property. And this is going to be divided between sort of near mine, depth potential targets, and some along strike extensions of our known mineralization. And the really exciting part for us is the greenfield stuff. So we're really trying to push outside of those that shear zone and see what else is out there in different lithologies along the same structure in different areas. So this is sort of our project pipeline or conveyor belt. So we have our known mineral reserves here with the Leprechaun Berry and Marathon, and the goal is to sort of work these projects along. Right now we've got a 14-year mine life. Ideally, that's significantly extended with some success in some of these targets. And we are seeing some interesting areas. I think even historically, there's been success in areas like Frank. Sprite and Victory both have resources on them already, but by both investors and the market in general, we've been fairly constrained to just drilling off the known resources and building that up. So I think trying to move these along, it'll take a bit of work, but there's a lot of potential and a lot of targets there. This is just a few photos of the crew out in the field. I think everyone's fairly familiar with some of the challenges that you have to work through in Newfoundland. I think both the till cover and the vegetation density, some of these forested areas, very challenging to get through. So the crew's been doing a great job of prospecting and getting out in the woods and really checking some of the LiDAR anomalies that we've discovered. But it's hard going, and I think that's why we're using some of these sort of more regional programs to hone in on some targets. So, like I mentioned, we did both a VLF, magnetics, and till survey over the last 6 months or so. Just wanted to take you very quickly through the geophysics that we've collected. So this is the VLF, and what we did is actually we worked with RPM Aerial, and they did a fantastic job with this. We had a 2007 survey that Richmond had collected that was at about 100-meter line spacing. Which was good. It was good data, but it doesn't have a lot of resolution to it. So what we did is we did another 100-meter line-spaced survey across the whole property with the same orientations, but we offset it by 50 meters. So we were able to integrate that with the 2007 survey and basically bring this down to a 50-meter resolution, which was really successful for us. So you can see some of the structures running through here. There's the Valentine Lake Shear Zone pops very nicely. There's an interesting feature up here, which actually turned out to be the power line we installed. So that threw us for a bit of a loop when we started looking at this. But there's a lot of different interesting structures in here that we're going to be exploring. And I think there's a lot of potential in there. If you look at comparable surveys over, say, the Abitibi or some of the main gold camps in the orogenic gold camps in the world, you'll see very similar signatures. So really exciting for us, and the VLF is a really good tool to define structures in these sorts of deposits. Likewise with the magnetics, also picks up a lot of the structures, but it also gives us some definition of obviously magnetic bodies. There's a lot of gabbros associated with our intrusion, which it maps out really nicely. And again, we have a competency contrast between those gabbros or the softer mafic dikes and the more brittle granitoid. So in our known areas, that's going to be very helpful for targeting. The till program, so like I mentioned, we did about 850 samples across the property, and this was at a 1 kilometer line spacing with 250 meter sample spacing. Just starting to get results back at this stage, but keep an eye out for those because I think they're going to be pretty exciting, and this is one of the biggest till programs in the area, certainly the biggest one we've ever undertaken, and we made sure to cover over the known deposits as well as our grassroots areas so that we have a baseline that we can compare to. That's one of the things we struggled with our smaller till programs in the past is we got some really great results, but we didn't have a baseline. We didn't really know what was good. So we made sure to cover the whole property off, do this systematically, and I think we've got some real potential coming out of that. Just a little quick overview of the near mine potential that we have. So these are our 3 main deposits, Leprechaun, Berry, and Marathon. This is looking to the northwest. And you can see, lots of dense drilling along those main deposits. And basically, as deep as we've drilled to date, you're getting good mineralization. And again, Melissa's talking about doing some deep drilling out there. And I think same sort of thesis is here is that most orogenic systems don't stop at 350, 400 meters. You get these that, if you look at some of the Kirkland Lake, Valentine stuff, they're going down 2.5 kilometers. And there's absolutely no reason that some of the Newfoundland gold systems don't do the same thing. It's the same settings, same structures, a little bit younger, but very, very comparable. So I think there's a lot of potential there for some deeper drilling and also to fill in some of these areas in between that just doesn't have a lot of density of drilling. So we'll certainly be targeting that moving into next year. So just in summary, this is again our target map. We've built up about 5 million ounces all categories now, which I think is pretty substantial. And like Peter mentioned, will be the largest gold mine in Atlantic Canada once we start operations in Q2 of next year. But really the excitement for me and I think for our team is stepping outside of that. There's areas like the Northwest Contact here, which is the northern contact of the granites with the Victoria Lake Supergroup. Same rheological contrast. There's the softer sediments contrasting with the more brittle granitoids and zero exploration historically. And even areas that, there's a few historical showings. There's South Quinn down here where Noranda did some drilling and had some decent results, never followed up on. And that's way out in the sediments and comparable units to what Kentera has in the Walding Lake showing. So there's all these little spotty things that have been popping up that are starting to suggest there's a lot more potential out there than just along the Valentine Lake Shear Zone. So you can really look for us to be exploring that over the next, certainly the next year as we finish our 100,000 meter drill program, but I anticipate that'll continue well into the future. And that's it for me. Thank you very much, everyone.